Today we're going to do a little follow-up with Bob on, we're going to discuss a little bit about OCD, a little dive into that a little bit deeper. And he's going to, what are you, about 7 months clean now?
9.
9.
Yeah, 9 tomorrow.
Wow. What did we do the first one? It was about 4, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So this is about 5 months later.
Yep.
So this is going to be a follow-up on that. So, why don't you just give us a little rundown on your background and then tell us a little bit about what's been going on in the last 5 months?
Yeah. How far into the background?
Just a little bit. I mean, we kind of got into, I mean, if people want to hear like the full story, they can go into, just give them a rundown of like when your OCD kind of developed or when you recognized it.
Yeah.
And just kind of dive into that and how that affected you in your childhood and how it's affected you in your adulthood, and then how that addiction has transpired and affected you there.
Yeah. So last time we went through like my whole life and it took like 2 hours.
Yeah.
So we'll do the quick summary. But yeah, by about age 5, I'm trying to figure out where to start even with this. I would say I started noticing OCD around 7, and then it got pretty bad in middle school. That was like the first sort of anxiety, depression that I had ever felt, right around 7th grade. And then it happened about every other year. So freshman year, junior year. And then I really didn't deal with anxiety and depression till a little later, but the OCD kind of was like a lingering ache, you know, and it would take different forms. 7 or 8, I don't really remember what I was doing. I think I was like, we can just dive right into it. I think I was like timing myself by how fast I could masturbate. And I started masturbating at a very young age, at age 5. And
You think that was the OCD?
Definitely.
Okay.
OCD. Yeah. I didn't really have any consequences then. You know, OCD is basically an equation. If then equation. It's if I do this, then this will happen.
Okay.
And if I don't do this, then this will happen. So it was kind of like just, I had to do it under 30 seconds, just really fast.
Yeah.
Really fast for masturbating. And later it would take on different forms, less pleasurable forms, really. Like, I would have to tell my parents certain things that I had done, like look at porn, or I had to tell them something really random. You know, like I have to say, I love you, which isn't bad. You know, it's a great thing,
right.
But I had to do it. Otherwise there would be some sort of consequence, like my dad would die or something. Later, it became a bit more torturous and it became more physical, where I would have to like stick things, you know, a couple, like so many times, or I'd have to like hold my breath for so long. Another one was I had to jump really loud in my bathroom, which was on the top floor of the house. So my parents were like, what the fuck is he doing up there? And I didn't know what I was doing. I had never heard of OCD until later. And I was just like doing all these things that were super random that I felt like I had to do for some reason.
Did your parents suspect, or did they have an idea or no?
I don't
how did your behavior affect them? Do you know?
To be honest, I don't know. That's a really good question.
Okay.
Yeah, I should definitely ask. I should, in particular, my mom that.
Right.
I'm sure she dealt with a bit of OCD as a kid. She'd have to jump over a bush a certain amount of times, and before bed. And sometimes her sister would help her, which I think that's really adorable. But yeah, I'm sure she picked up on some OCD symptoms pretty early on.
So hereditary.
I don't know if there's any link to that.
Okay.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Interesting.
But I've certainly picked up a lot of the same things that my mom has.
Right.
We're both fucking crazy in a good way.
Yeah. Oh, she's awesome.
Yeah. And then, you know, when I would stay busy, when I would stay focused or motivated, like I had really good years, sophomore year and senior year. And I think sophomore year opened up a huge portal into friendship because I could drive. So I could kind of go anywhere I wanted. And then senior year, I was just looking forward to going to Colorado and moving out to, the mountains that I wanted to go to. So I stayed very distracted, very inspired, and my OCD would really go down along with my anxiety and depression. They're basically all linked.
Okay.
They're all they flow in the exact same way.
So with skateboarding, snowboarding, all that stuff, that's kept you preoccupied.
Yeah, and we can get into that. So when I was 5, I realized that I was a cross-dresser, that I really enjoyed putting on women's clothes. It would sexually arouse me. It would make me feel excited, and it would just give me like a thrill. Basically, my first sort of high.
Okay.
Very similar to if you are prone to alcoholism or if you've done maybe like ecstasy or Molly, you feel this certain wave of euphoria. For an alcoholic like me, the first like 3 beers were pure, just a euphoric mountain. It would just keep getting better and better, and then it would kind of plateau. But that's what it felt like. And growing up in the church, growing up in, a very Christian based community, it wasn't necessarily like outspoken against necessarily, but I knew that it wasn't what the church wanted.
It wasn't acceptable.
It was definitely unacceptable. And since my dad was the pastor and also my hero, I didn't want to let him down. So you kind of did, I did what anybody would do, I think, in that, well, most people would do. And what I think a lot of people do anyways, without being a cross-dresser, which is they conform to, the social norms of the society.
Right.
And so that's when I think my first sort of like small drip of, filling up my trauma bucket sort of started, was just suppressing this inner authenticity that I wanted to express, but I knew was going to be very difficult for me to deal with the embarrassment and very difficult to watch my parents go through.
Yeah, sure.
And that was just an assumption. They probably would have handled it really well. So that's when I believe my OCD first started. Because when the world, this is what I've kind of come to, is when the world seems out of control, you want to do everything you can to control it. And OCD gives you that pure sense of control. You're definitely not controlling it, but it gives you that sense of it. And so that's kind of when it started. And then I, through conforming and finding out other things that I liked, which was skateboarding, snowboarding, wakeboarding, anything with a board, anything that had some adrenaline tied to it, lots of mountain biking. That was my new drug, if you will. That was what helped me keep the OCD thoughts at bay and also the cross-dressing thoughts at bay. And it helped me feel normal. It helped me feel cool. And it gave me a really nice, like, chemical buzz,
Sure.
doing it.
The cross-dressing, when did you come out with that to your parents?
I think I came out when I was in...
That sounds like a terrible word, just coming out. I don't
know.
really like that. When did you tell them about it?
Yeah, I told them about it when I think 11th grade.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you pretty much kept it a secret, even from your friends?
Yeah, I think I started telling people here and there pretty much when instant messaging started coming out, and I could be protected behind a computer screen.
Sure.
So ICQ is what we used, and that was, I think, 7th grade. I think I'd like give people hints of it, like I like to do my nails or something.
Okay.
And I'd see how they reacted. But I don't think I ever came out to somebody or told anybody until freshman or sophomore year.
Okay.
So the whole childhood, yeah, it was just me.
Yep. That's a lonely place.
It is, yeah. And thankfully I did have the internet. Otherwise I would have been much more lonely. And I was able to find at least like trans people's existence, because they really didn't exist in the town that I grew up
Right.
in,
Right.
that I know of. And then, cross-dressing is maybe more taboo or less understood than, I don't know. It would be harder to find that on the internet, support for cross-dressing.
Right. Right.
Back then
Yeah.
anyways, before Reddit. Um, yeah.
Wow. That's something else. So, let's touch on your Christianity a little bit, or growing up Christian. How did the OCD affect that in your prayer life? And were there certain rituals that you felt like you had to do to connect with like the belief system that you were in at the time?
Yeah. In terms of OCD.
Yeah.
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 So a really surface level one is we would sing God our Father during dinner at night. Do you know that one?
Probably.
God our Father, we thank you for many blessings. Amen.
No.
It's very simple, very short. And at the end, I'd have to do a certain amount of amens in front of my whole family. So I'd be like, Amen, 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 Amen. And it's still a joke to this day. And what they didn't know, they thought I was just being goofy. What they didn't know is I had to do it a certain amount of times.
Right.
But that one was pretty innocent, pretty funny. Nothing really bad came of that. Mine was way more so a lot of shame and guilt, which
Okay.
doesn't even have to be tied to OCD by any means. But shame and guilt is directly tied to a lot of OCD. You feel like you have to tell somebody in order to be relieved of whatever sin you did. So for me, it was masturbating, and I did that a lot as a kid. So I would just constantly feel like I had spilled my seed, and I had committed this sin. So it was kind of just, and then on top of that, the shame and guilt I felt for who I was, as a cross-dresser, and then shame and guilt for looking up the types of porn that I would look at.
Okay.
Just feeling anything that veered from normalcy, I felt guilt and shame over. And I kind of just weighed on me quite a bit. And I know that was directly tied to my Christian ways, but in the end, I think I was just trying to get to heaven, be
Sure.
a good person, be a good believer.
So which is a pretty normal response
Yeah.
to growing up in a Christian atmosphere or an indoctrinated atmosphere of any sort.
Yeah.
So
100%.
yeah, so there wasn't really like any like have to do prayers. It was just more like participation in what your parents were doing, and then
Yeah, it was pretty normal.
okay.
Yeah, pretty normal guilt behind growing up Christian.
Have you ever heard of exposure response?
Yeah.
What is that?
So,
It's exposure response prevention.
yep.
What is it? ERP is what they call it?
Yeah, ERP.
Talk to me about that. I don't know much about it
So that is what I practice. That is the type of OCD therapy that I've been working on currently.
Okay.
Yeah. The last time we talked, I was a week away from starting it,
Oh, okay.
and I was super scared.
Oh, because it's a facing of things, right?
It's a direct facing of things. You can no longer, I mean, you can do whatever you want, but if you want to, you're never going to get rid of OCD, probably, if
Right.
you have it.
Yeah.
That is kind of the sad part. But you can manage it really well.
I'm kind of this new thing with psilocybin,
Yeah.
like psilocybin therapy.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard of guys coming out of, and I don't know if it's a mild OCD or people like being freed
Yeah.
of that for the most part. Like
Oh
it's
no,
not.
I've heard of people having OCD so bad that they literally can't leave the house, doing a heroic dose, which is like 6 grams of mushrooms, and then
under therapeutic
under therapeutic
care
conditions, yeah. And then they're done. They don't have OCD anymore.
Right.
And so, yeah, maybe for them, it completely rewires their brain where those synapses that trigger the OCD, they just don't even exist.
Wow.
Which would be, I mean, I've done psychedelics and I always hoped that it would cure like my alcoholism or my depression, but it never did because I would always just do it recreationally.
Right. Well, that's why I think the therapeutic part of that is the important part, like the guidance
100%.
of somebody, because I've tried microdosing even recently, and it's not an effective method
Yeah.
without somebody walking you through the process. So
Yeah.
that's where that hero dose is like, if you take a hero dose, you're just going to have a really good time.
Right. Or a really
Bad time.
hard time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really bad.
I've never done a heroic dose. But I've taken like a half hero's dose, and it ended up with me crying in the middle of a group of friends.
Really?
I just felt so lonely and so scared.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then, I came out of that one pretty good, and it helped me kind of work through the rest of the vacation I was on.
How did they respond to that? Because that probably exposed you in a way that you
Yeah,
weren't used to,
yeah,
amongst people that you weren't usually nor like used to being exposed to.
yeah. One of my buddies was like, "Man, I can't believe you came out of that." Like I would have never been able to come out of something, like getting sad during a mushroom trip. And it was I don't know, it was just an interesting. I don't really believe in bad trips. I believe in hard trips and learning experiences. And
Sure.
I've never gone through the worst of. I've heard of some pretty torturous stories.
Yeah.
But it's all learning. This for me was, I was a new father, and I had to go to the bathroom just to like cry alone. And I was looking at my phone. Looking at your phone while tripping mushrooms is an interesting experience. It's very disorienting. But my daughter was on my homepage, and she just said to me, "Dad, go have fun. Go just let go of like your of like needing to be with me. Mom's got me. I'm fine." And so it became a really great night after that.
Nice.
Yeah, it's like the most, I don't know, cliche story probably, but it was.
Well, it's hard to switch. I've done a heroic dose, and it's hard to shut when the sadness starts or when the emotions start. It's really, really hard to reroute and come back to a positive space,
Yeah.
because sadness, everything's amplified like 10 times. So if you go down a bad road, you're going to be there for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So to come out of that is very, very difficult. And especially if you're just trying to have a good time. But I mean, I haven't done the therapy part of it, which I intend to soon. But
Yeah. And I think what I've always struggled with, what I really struggled with that trip was this idea that I'd heard so many times, which is dying to yourself
yes,
and letting go, truly letting go, and just riding the river. And I've never been able to do that in any part of my life, let alone psychedelics, when it's really intense and it feels very real. And this exposure response therapy that I've been doing is mini training on doing that.
okay,
Yeah, it's just funny that we brought this up, because that's exactly what happens. You have to diet a certain beliefs that you want to stick to, and you have to kind of care a little less about things that you need to care a little less about. And it takes a pretty solid like understanding of your mental inventory, what matters and what doesn't, what's going to hold you back and what's going to open you up, what's going to constrict you,
Sure.
what's going to just like stunt your growth. And so for me, I had like a list of OCD rituals, and I did this a week after we did this podcast. It was really shortly after. I had a weekend planned, and it's this part of ERP called flooding. You have a couple different things you can do. Imaginal therapy, where you write down a story about what you struggle with, and you can basically meditate on it 10 times, 3 times a day. And
Okay.
by going through that script, it's called a disaster script, you get used to the feeling of being uncomfortable in that thought. In this,
So this is like releasing control.
it's releasing control and the need for that control, the need for you to want to grip that script, whatever that script is. Um, uh, and then there's in vivo is what it's called, and it's an actual real practice where you you throw yourself into the place that you're avoiding. So a really easy example would be checking the stove at night 3 times, checking the knobs on the stove, and then taking a photo of the stove so that I could look at it in bed and make sure that the stove lights were off.
Okay.
Right. So that's pretty surface level. It's not really thought based at all. It's just a very simple OCD ritual. So flooding would be like, okay, I'm only going to check the stove lights once, and then I'm going to walk away and go to bed.
Oof.
Yeah. And so the first day I did most of my rituals just in one day. And I told my therapist, I'm like, my cousin is coming to town. He's spending the night and it's already throwing me off, from my regular routine. Like, are you sure I should be doing this right now? He's like, when you are in that situation, that's the best time because you're going to be the most uncomfortable.
Right.
And man, I was so fucking uncomfortable, all day for the first day. So I've always been afraid of the numbers 4 and 37. 37 is an interesting one because it was back in high school. I had to gag with my finger,
Right.
myself 37 times on the school bus home from a swim meet. And I had to do it in front of people. Talk about
Yeah, because you can't control that, right?
Yeah, I had to.
Yeah.
Because my OCD was telling me to. And I thought I was doing it in a way, because it was nighttime, so the lights were off in the bus. I thought I was doing it in a way where no one could see me. But then I looked at my buddy to my right, and he was just giving me the craziest stare. And I just was scarred.
Wow.
And I knew that was a risk, because that was the point of it.
Right.
It was a risky move. That's what OCD wants. It wants to just
Demoralize.
Yeah, and really fuck you up. If things are going good, it's going to find a way to fuck you up.
Huh.
And so from that point on, I was always afraid and very fearful of the number 37. So
No.
every hour of the day, 8:37, 9:37, whatever, would haunt me. And I'd have to do breath work or something to I had to do certain things through the number 37. So that first day of flooding and ERP therapy, I decided to drink 4 cups of coffee, which I don't like the number 4. I had to do it in 4 different cups. So it's almost like OCD. It's almost like how you light a fire to stop a fire,
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it, man.
And then I had to stop drinking coffee at 4:37 p.m.
Oh,
So my
wow.
last sip of coffee was at 4:37, which out of all the minutes in the day, 4:37 on the clock is the most terrifying for me. And so that night I had to have 4 sparkling waters. If I was drinking, I would have had to have had 4. I would have never done this, by the way, if I weren't sober. I would have never gotten around to this type of therapy.
Why do you think that is?
Because
you're distracted?
Because alcohol was enough to relieve my OCD behaviors.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But yeah, so 4 sparkling waters and then, a bunch of other little things that were just small, just small things. And then I had to go to sleep. And I've always been, not always, but I've been afraid of sleep for a while. Fear of losing sleep, fear of losing sleep for 10 days and going crazy. It's another OCD thing.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
Yeah. So, and I actually did an imaginal script around that helped me get through a lot of it. And now I really don't care if I lose sleep for a night. It would still probably, freak me out a little bit because no one likes to lose a night of sleep.
Sure.
But I wouldn't just think I'm going to have to go to the ER and go crazy, So yeah, that first night of flooding, when I woke up in the morning, it was like, holy shit, I am powerful.
Really?
That it was the most empowering thing I think I had ever done in my life. Was just because I just didn't think it was possible. I had just been living in this routine based life for, total of 10 years. Sure. At its peak, I would say. And I just thought to myself, I never thought I would do these really simple things, because what makes it so hard to do like 4 cups of coffee is that all you have to do is take a sip from another cup of coffee, and then it becomes 5 cups of coffee. It's a very easy thing to do. No one gets hurt. You barely go out of your way. And so it's a very easy OCD ritual to say yes to.
Okay.
And so saying no to it is difficult.
Staying in the 4.
Yeah, because it's so easy just to do the 5th cup.
Yeah.
You know? Like if I had to walk to my daughter's school 3 miles away, or someone would die at midnight, I just wouldn't do it because it's too tough.
Right.
It would take too much time. It would be too crazy.
Yeah.
Back when my OCD was peaking, I wouldn't have done that. Now I wouldn't even think about it.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a chore per se.
So now I've kind of become successful at those like very material type of OCD rituals, but the thought OCD, I don't even know what you'd call them, but like the pedophilic thoughts, or it's oftentimes sexual thoughts, or things that you really can't disprove by doing something like drinking a cup of coffee.
Sure.
These thoughts that you latch onto that you just can't let go of, those are the more difficult things for me to get through. And that's when like the practice of, honestly, like Buddhist practices have really become important to me. Meditating, like mindfulness meditation. And I know it's such a cliche because it kind of helps with everything.
Right. Yeah.
But the idea of treating a thought as just a thought and letting it go, which is really potent in the mindfulness meditation practices, that is exactly what you're practicing. When you have a thought like, oh my gosh, did my groin area just tingle a little bit when I looked at that kid?
Sure.
And then you latch onto that thought, and then you go in circles of testing. You think about that kid, and then you check in with your groin. You keep doing that. Sometimes it can last hours, days, weeks, months. It has driven me to a point of I want to kill myself. I want to drink myself to death every night, which I have done.
Right.
Because of this.
Yeah.
And then it just goes away naturally. But it usually takes 2 to 3 months for intense OCD thoughts like this. The only other kinds that have lasted that long is when I thought I had ALS. I was constantly picking up books and testing if I thought I had the right amount of strength. I was going on these Reddit forums asking people what it's like when they first get diagnosed with ALS. And it was just like, which is really hurtful to people that actually have ALS.
Yeah.
And so, for me, it's kind of like practicing. It's like exercising in small amounts in order to run the marathon.
Okay.
So the marathon being randomly having one of those pedophilic OCD thoughts.
Yeah. Which from my understanding is pretty common for OCD. Which we should state that. It's not that you're a practicing pedophile. It's that you have a sticky thought and it happens to be in a sexual manner towards a child. And then you test your body and your resilience to see, to test whether you're not a pedophile or not.
Exactly.
So it's really finding out if you're that thing that you're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to go through the body test and the mind test to coincide with those two and really convince yourself otherwise.
Yeah, you have to do it so many times to where you feel absolutely nothing in your groin, which is exactly like asking yourself to not think about an itch and then not feeling an itch, which you're never going to do. You're always going to feel an itch. And they actually did this interesting study, and I wish I could cite the sources, but they brought in, like 200, fairly small sample size, but it's hard to find these people, 200 people who thought they were pedophiles. And then they would run a truth test on them. And I think it was like 48% of them actually had OCD, which is a crazy amount of people.
That's a lot.
to be living in like a torturous mindset. Like,
Yeah.
and then, another differentiation between real pedophiles and people who struggle with POCD is that real pedophiles really don't feel guilty
Sure. No,
about,
they don't.
about their actions
Yeah.
because it makes them feel how we feel when we fall in love with an adult.
You're right.
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 And like, how fucking lucky are we
Yeah.
that we weren't born that way?
Oh
You
man.
know?
And yeah, especially, well, there's always, statistically, if you've been molested, you transfer that molestation to somebody else. And you have to make a conscious choice to not be that
Yep.
and not go down that road. Like, I was molested, but in my mind, I don't want to transfer that because I understand the pain that I had to grow up with
Yep.
and what it did to my life. Where somebody who's narcissistic is always looking for a control, and narcissists don't generally feel guilt.
Yeah.
They're not apologetic. They're not sorry. They're very justifiable in their behavior and their action. And that's the same way a pedophile would react to that situation until they're caught, of course.
Right. Or someone who can't help but play victimhood their whole lives and feel like the only way to make the actions done against them are just is to do it
Right.
to somebody else.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Which is talk about such a closed-minded way. Because I find myself doing that a lot with other parts of my life,
Sure.
feeling like a victim and then lashing out at someone else just to make myself feel a little better. I digress.
Do you think that's part of the OCD though? Or is that
No.
just a natural response to life?
I think it's a way for me to cope. I did this with my parents. I held a lot of resentment towards them when I first lost my faith.
Okay.
And I put all the blame on them. Why did you think it was a good idea to raise me with this false hope of thinking there's a heaven when I die? And now I'm left with nothing. You got my hopes up and now
Feel abandoned.
now I'm depressed.
Yeah.
Forever.
Yeah, because we talked about that in the last one. It was I don't remember what my question was to you, but it was something to the effect of because you were pretty much atheist at that time. I think the first time we spoke,
Yeah.
and now you're on the more of the agnostic.
Yeah.
So explain to me what agnostic is. Atheist, you just don't believe. So what's the agnostic part?
Agnosticism is just you don't know. There might be something out there. There might not be, but you're open to it. Typically, agnostics are.
Right.
Or you just don't care enough to really seek it out.
Sure.
So it's a pretty lazy label, but I think it's probably the most accurate one that anybody could ever have if they're really being honest. The great comedian Pete Holmes describes himself as a Christ-leaning agnostic, which I love. Because, that is a huge part of my foundation. I know a lot about the Christ story than any other any other dogmatic belief. But yeah, those resentments are strong, and I remember I would get drunk with my family at night. We'd all be drinking, it wasn't like crazy. I was getting drunk.
Right.
But then I just like bring it up out of nowhere. I'm like, y'all really fucked me up.
So they were having a beer while you're drinking to yourself into a snotty oblivion.
And my parents are the two most loving people
Oh man, they're great.
on earth. They are my heroes. And all they've ever tried to do is what's best. When you go into parenthood, now that I'm doing it, I don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
I'm really just trying as hard as I can to make sure that my kid has a really great life. And I know for a fact that's what my parents were doing.
Yeah.
And to think that I could just blame them and hold resentments is so foolish and so silly and so, it's just so naive, And I think, my inability to let go of my victimhood really kept me close-hearted. My therapist talks about expansion and contraction a lot, which is kind of a little new agey for me, but I think it's a really easy way to describe what you feel when I feel I'm a victim of something. If I'm like, oh, poor me, I have OCD, or poor me, I'm an alcoholic, I close off. I don't open myself up to anything. I'm contracting so hard that I'm done. And I'm in a bad mood, and it'll lead me to anxiety and depression and all the other negative shit, But if I treat OCD as an opportunity or treat my alcoholism as a learning opportunity, I'm lucky that I survived what I did if I can go into it with that mentality, if I can somehow navigate the powers that I had to keep my addiction going, which is a lot of stamina when you're in the middle of it.
Yeah.
If I can somehow navigate that energy into something more beautiful, then I mean, that's totally expansive, you know? And those are the times when I am feeling much more like a hopeful agnostic as opposed to like a nihilist or atheist.
Because that was the kind of the statement that, well, I don't remember the exact question, but it was, so what it had something to do with what do you have to look forward to then? And you're like, nothing. As an atheist, and that's the depressing part of being an atheist is there's nothing to look forward to.
Yep.
So it's almost, in my mind,
I do think there's really, sorry I cut you off.
No,
I
go ahead.
I think there's really hopeful atheists out there and people who live really joyous lives that are atheists.
Yeah, I would agree.
I know that they exist. I listen to them a lot. But it doesn't work for me because my atheism leads to a life of, or I guess a philosophy of determinism, which is really just, we don't have free will. It's where it's like where Calvinism and atheism have a weird little Venn diagram moment where you think that we're just compiled cells. You know, if you think about molecules combining or atoms combining together to create the first molecule, there's no agency behind that. It just happens naturally. And then molecules become cells, cells become tissue, tissue becomes organs, and then they become us, right?
Yep.
With consciousness. And when you think about who is directing all this, who's the orchestrator, you really can't put your finger on anybody or anything. And you know for a fact that an atom doesn't have a nervous system and a way to direct itself to another atom to make something greater. It's just the way it happens. It's just nature's way.
Okay.
And so my thought when I go down that path is like, well, then that is exactly how brains work. You know, we have millions of synapses going on at any given moment, and there's no one orchestrating that. You cannot pinpoint the you in you. And so it's kind of just up to nature to have its way. And the illusion that we have of this free will of choice, you know, when we're given two options, is really just the equal sign at the end of an equation. You know, this happened, so I'm going to choose this.
Okay.
And that is probably what I do believe. But I also have hope that there's still mystery out in the world for new philosophies, ideas about consciousness. I'm very open to it and I'm very hopeful. And it kind of is what drives me to like keep searching on this. I don't think that humans are capable of understanding what we can't understand. And I know that's kind of stupid to say, but it's like trying to show a dog how Reddit works. I'm just going to keep coming back to Reddit.
It's all about the Reddit.
It's trying to teach a dog anything, and their brains just cannot comprehend it. And I really have hope that our brains just can't comprehend something that's just outside of our reach.
Right. Yeah. No, I would agree with that. It's very difficult to, even for Christianity, spirituality. We'll just say spiritual people. It's very difficult for them to fully believe in what they believe.
Yeah.
I mean, and fully live it out. If you fully believe in what you believe, you're going to fully live it out. And that's very difficult for humans to do because we have doubt. We have all these things that step in the way of that hope.
Yeah. I'm really jealous of people that can do that.
Right.
And actually like my brother and my sister can do that.
Yeah.
Like they are true Christians.
Yes.
And they live like it. Their attitudes are like it. And their love is like that.
Yeah.
And I could slip my brother any sort of information that I learn and it'll just bounce right off of him. Like he'll soak it up, you know, he'll listen to me.
Right.
But it doesn't affect his faith whatsoever.
Yeah, it doesn't shake his foundation at all.
Yeah.
And that's the same way with your dad and your mom. I mean,
100%.
I mean, I don't know your sister very well. You know, it's always been in passing, but
yeah,
because I was always involved with you guys, but you boys and your dad. But yeah,
I always just feel guilty now.
Really?
Talking to my dad about it.
Well, he loves talking to you.
I do, but I just like, I always like, I'm like, I'm such a douchebag sometimes, you know, and I just get all up in my head and then I start feeling, I'm like, my poor dad, he's just such a sweet guy.
Yeah, but I mean, we've had short conversations about that. So he's just like, he loves you, and that's
Yeah.
all that. I mean, that is the core to. It's not about what you believe. He loves having the conversation, but the thing is that he just absolutely loves who you are,
For sure. Yeah.
and I mean that's hard to come by. As
It's
even
amazing.
yeah,
I mean, I've got so many friends who've fallen out of their faith in later years and their family just cannot accept it.
yeah,
Right?
they're very unaccepting.
And it's just so sad. You know, you're given this one child or however many children,
Yeah,
your blood. It's just, for me, it's really special
yeah,
with the sort of kinship I have with my the sort of
yeah.
relationship I have with my kids. It's got to be the most powerful thing I've ever experienced.
When you have that, and we kind of talked about that last night, you have that kind of that lineage with your family,
Right.
your mom, your dad, your brother and your sister. You have that foundation that's built, that's really beautiful and solid, and now you get to do that with your family.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
So that's one of the beautiful things about your journey and what's happening. And so in later years, how have they come to understand you better?
My family?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, well, I've been really open with them lately. You know, like, they now know about my sort of gender fluidity, even though I may not express it often. They at least know about it.
Okay.
And
Is that the cross-dressing? So I'm sorry,
dressing,
I'm
yeah,
putting you
I
in
use
this.
different words depending on what I'm feeling, I guess, in the moment. But
Sure.
it's it's just like a comfort in wearing women's wear or
Okay.
makeup.
So explain the gender fluidity to me, because I'm pretty ignorant when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah, so gender fluidity is someone who just feels a little male, a little female, not biologically, of course. There's still,
Right.
you got chromosomes for that, but sort of who wants to express a more feminine side of themselves.
Okay.
Maybe like a tomboy would be something someone your age
Similar. Yeah, similar. Yeah, thanks, man.
or being androgynous is a more like, I don't know what I'm trying to say.
It was just really just explaining more of the gender fluidity. I didn't know if there was something else in addition to the cross-dressing that would.
No,
be an
mine is pretty surface. I don't like take hormones or have surgeries. I'm not like transitioning. Mine is just more gender expression.
And how does your wife, how can I say that, navigate that, accept that? How do you guys talk about that? Where's her stance with you in all of this? Because she's a wonderful woman. So
Yeah, she is extremely supportive. She was the first person I ever told that accepted me and loved me that much more because of it.
okay,
This was 17 years ago,
wow,
like 3 months into us dating, which is, for people listening, is way too long to wait.
yeah,
Tell them night one.
yeah,
And it's been difficult to navigate it because it comes in waves where it'll be really strong sometimes. And sometimes I will question, like, should I be on hormones? Should I transition? And then other times, like right now, I'm in a state of like, I am really loving the body that I'm in.
okay.
And so,
Which is also a struggle for OCD, right? Body dysmorphia.
yeah, which I didn't know about until recently, but it's true. Like any mirror that I pass, I'm looking right at and I'm judging myself. I'm looking at all aspects of my body and my face, trying to figure out what I can do differently to help get it where I want it.
Well, then let me ask you this: does that transfer into social anxiety for you? That body dysmorphia, how you present yourself in public?
I've never been ashamed of that.
Okay.
Yeah, which is
So it's more internal.
It's really internal, yeah. And I think I would feel like if I were to dress up in femme, which is what I would call it, dress up like a woman, I would feel really ashamed and really embarrassed. And that is a hurdle that I think I need to get over, because I feel that shame and that embarrassment because I'm ashamed of who I am. And I still have that deep rooted shame from when I grew up and I was trying to conform. And I don't necessarily desire to go out and shock the world,
Right.
you know? But I feel like a really great sense of peace when I do it,
Okay.
you know? So going out like that, it is sometimes something I really want to do, you know?
So what keeps you from doing that?
I have a family. I live in it's not a conservative town, but it's a pretty like normal town.
Yeah.
You know, it's a normal mountain town.
Yeah.
I feel weird for even just wearing like a pink hat, you know, and I shouldn't.
You shouldn't.
But, you know, part of all this is like being really, I scrutinize myself a lot. Just if I don't fit in with that true norm at any given point.
So do you get the sticky thoughts over that? Like, because like for me, I would make a decision and either I would do it or wouldn't do it. And if it was a fear, I would just face it. But that's just part of who I am. If I fear something, I'll usually stand in front of it.
Yeah.
Because I don't mind exposing myself to overcome a hurdle.
Yeah. And that is what I'm practicing.
Okay.
And it is leaking into different parts of my life, like cross-dressing, like becoming comfortable in being public with wearing a more androgynous outfit or something. And it is helping in that regard, like big time. I feel like I had an example of, you know, no.
What's been one of the hopefully this is not triggering, but one of your biggest hurdles as far as facing some of those OCD thoughts? Like what's been your biggest fear that's presented itself in the last few months that you've started this therapy?
Anytime I get the pedophilic thoughts, I get extremely fearful. And I feel like I relapse, and all the ERP I've done so far has been for nothing. So those are becoming less sticky,
That's good.
So through this practice of other parts of my OCD life, I'm able to have a thought trigger me and then to let it go within a couple minutes, as opposed to days or weeks, which is really unbelievably freeing. And it's funny because when the thought comes in, it is just as strong as when it occurred for the very first time.
Oh, wow.
So now I have to just say to myself, okay, that was a thought I had, and that's all it was. And this feeling of discomfort, this pit in my stomach that suddenly arrived, this anxiety in my chest, it will go away. And you don't know when, but it will go away. And every time it goes away.
So you're basically now sitting with it, saying, I accept this, and I'll sit with it till it goes away.
And something that's been really helpful is naming the parts.
Oh.
What is the sensation that I'm feeling when I feel that sense of anxiety? And it's like, it's funny to put pain, emotional pain, into words, because you realize that the physical pain is no worse than when you're in the middle of like a bike ride.
Right.
You know?
Right.
You don't want to feel it.
Yep.
And I used to have to dodge those or depend on alcohol every single day to dodge those feelings. And what happens to you real quick, for me anyways, was my life had to get quite a bit more difficult in different ways when I first got sober, because I had to deal with the pain of life head on.
Right. Yeah, you're going to sit with that a lot more intentionally.
At first, I was trying to avoid it through exercise. I still exercise a lot, but now I do it for enjoyment.
Okay.
And through stuffing my face with ice cream, which I still do.
Yeah.
But not for that reason.
Right.
And now I'm able, and I still avoid, I'm not a professional at this.
Right, right.
And that's what's kind of exciting is like, I know where I am now and I know I can get it even further. And it's like, how far can I take this? Could I actually reverse something like addiction? Is that even possible? Something that nobody thinks is done? And addiction being like, obviously drinking. I'd love to drink again.
Right.
It's because I'm still a major alcoholic. I could never go back to drinking and be a normal drinker right now.
Right.
But could I reverse that? I don't know. That's wishful thinking. I'm not really like, I love my life sober.
Yeah.
So I'm not really thinking, but could I reverse something like OCD? Could I, like that might be the most powerful thing I could ever do in my life. That would be the most meaningful thing I could do to myself.
For sure.
As far as self-love goes.
Yep.
Is something like that, because then I have just freed up hours of my day to be in the present moment, to be with my kids, to be with my wife, friends.
Wow. So do you have hope for that?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Big time. If I can live long enough.
Because that's not the narrative that we're taught, is that these things are curable.
Right.
It's let's put you on medicine and
I am on medicine.
Are you?
Yeah, I am on a low dose of clomipramine, which was a sort of like a first generation OCD drug. It's an antidepressant.
Okay.
And it's a low dose because when I started taking high doses, I started feeling crazy, like really confused.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm sticking with 50 milligrams for now, and it's kind of just like a pill I pop.
Okay.
Pretty like I take it with a bunch of other like supplements and stuff, and I don't really think about it, So I can't say I can blame this progress I've made on the medicine, but it might be helping. Where I actually notice it is in the therapy. Like I really think if you're going to be placed on medication for OCD, you should combine a therapy with it, because it's almost like combining the therapy with the psychedelic.
Okay. Yeah.
You really want both to get the best outcome.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. That's what I really discovered is that these things that are out there that, this idea that we can just microdose on our own. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm pretty in depth and I dig into my life pretty regularly, and microdosing doesn't help that.
Yeah.
On my own. Because I'm not able to, I've already navigated a lot of this stuff, so I don't know how to re-navigate it to rewire it now. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah.
So,
and that is what, I mean, ERP would probably help you in that.
Right.
Because that's what you're trying to do. There's another thing called TMS, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but it's this helmet that you put on.
Okay.
And it zaps your brain, and it re-navigates the way your wires are, the way your synapses are wired. So what you have to do is think about like a triggering thought, what gets you depressed or suicidal. For me, what triggers my OCD. And then it somehow...
Mine's life.
Yeah, life. I just have to think. I just have to open my eyes. And I don't really know what it does,
Have you tried it?
No.
The Zappy helmet?
No.
Okay.
I haven't, but I thought about it. It's like $30 a session. You do it for a couple weeks.
They say, now I don't know if it's the same thing as what I'm thinking, but there's some new studies. It's basically zapping your brain again.
Yep.
It's an old practice, but they have refined it. They used to do it on mental patients, and they've definitely refined it to a point
where... Is it just a lobotomy and they're using a small bit? Is that it?
That's pretty much it. But it is this zapping of the brain, and it's like a clicking, and it rewires your thought process.
It might be the same thing.
I think it is.
It's used for PTSD.
Yeah.
And it's got a pretty damn high success rate.
It does.
Like 60%, which is really, if I were just going into that without having any ERP right now, and I was like still struggling majorly, something like 60% success rate would get me
motivated,
totally elated. Yeah, really hopeful.
Well, and going back to the psilocybin, a gentleman I met yesterday, he's got a ranch that has like, I think it's like 87% success rate. Yeah, 80 or low 90s. and it's the Do Good Ranch in Western Colorado, and there, and that's for PTSD athletes, first responders, suicidals. I don't know if they ventured into the OCD and all that stuff, but I would imagine that they will
Yeah.
with time.
Oh, I'm sure they would take me as an alcoholic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Probably. Yeah, for sure. Addiction. I mean, there's so many things that natural medicines can heal, and you don't have to take them long term,
Yeah.
which is the crazy thing because the government wants you on long term. The pharmas want you on long term
Yeah. Yeah.
because that's their billions.
Yeah. It makes
So,
sense.
Yeah. So it's
We got to help them out.
right.
Big pharma. We got to
Yeah,
keep
no,
them
we
in
don't.
business.
No, we don't. Man.
I want to do something like that. And so far ERP has been by far the most powerful thing I've ever experienced in my life, besides like having a kid, I guess.
Right.
But in terms of mental health and recovery, ERP has been the thing that works for me.
Yeah.
And I think I think at this point I'm kind of maintaining, I'm kind of doing the fine tuning of OCD and managing it. And I think that something like TMS, along with psychedelic therapy, it's like doing everything I can would be, if you were able to do that, you would probably end up being pretty much cured.
Right. Yeah. I would agree with that.
It takes a very privileged sort of person financially to be able to do something like that. But yeah, ERP is free, which is really cool.
Yes.
You should get a therapist, and that's harder.
Yep.
But you can find some pretty great YouTube videos on it. And all it really is facing your fears.
Right.
Over and over again.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's not like microdosing where you need guidance, but I mean, you can get ideas from other people for guidance.
Yeah.
And how to face, like if you're having a sticky thought, well, you go face that sticky thought. So
are we allowed to name people on this?
Yeah.
Like a resource?
Oh, yeah.
This guy, forget his name. Give me 1 second.
I mean, he might sue me, but I don't have anything to take, so you take my microphones.
His name is Zach Westerbeck, and he's on Instagram.
Okay.
And he's an OCD specialist, and he does these short videos of all sorts of good practices.
Oh, okay.
So if you got any listener that's struggling with OCD, like check him out on Instagram, because his stuff on his Instagram is free. You can pay him for actual therapy.
Right.
But he's got some really amazing like introductions to a lot of these practices.
Nice. That's awesome. Well, we're going to close this out, but is there anything you could suggest now that you're 9 months in to sobriety and doing therapy, and even how your family's improved?
Yeah. So I suggest finding a community, whether it be, I go to AA.
Okay.
Because there's just so many meetings. It's everywhere. Dharma Recovery is a good one. You could go to like a local rehab, or I'm sure a church has got something, but finding people that are like-minded, because recovery is really isolating. You sometimes feel like you're the only person who can't drink. And that gets really frustrating. It gets really depressing. So finding a community where you can just like vent, just relate to some people. Staying strong in like the new, like for me, I felt depression sober for the first time since high school.
Okay.
And I was a total mess. And if you can somehow stay, for me, it was distraction. That would help me. I would play video games, do anything to just cope a little bit, because I wanted to drink so badly.
Okay.
If you can somehow tough it out, there is another side.
So finding healthy distractions.
Healthy distractions. Exercise is a really great one. Sleep, like all this shit that everybody tells you is actually really beneficial. But I've seen it enough where like, depression comes along and you relapse because it's easier, and it is easier.
Yeah. But, well, not in the short term, and not
in the short
long
term.
term.
Yeah.
The long term is very, very damaging, which you know. And you almost lost
Yeah.
a lot
Yep.
due to that.
Yeah, and I'm pretty fortunate because I
Yeah.
have two little kids, and that is ultimately what keeps me sober
Yeah.
all the time. This would be much harder if I was doing it on my own.
Yes.
It's I have a lot of friends who've done it, who I went to rehab with, and I don't know how they do it. It's like it's as close to a miracle as I've seen.
Well, it's a nightmare, is what it is. I I know people right now that are just muscling through it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, why put so much effort into muscling through it when you can stretch this energy out over the long term with somebody that cares about you?
Exactly. Yeah, it's called being a dry drunk or
Yeah.
white knuckling it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like my single friends go to multiple AA meetings a day.
Really?
Yeah, I go to
Just
one.
for
I go to one
community.
week. Yeah. Yeah. And then for like family stuff, I mean, my wife and I have alcohol really threw a wedge in us
Okay.
to a degree that we almost didn't make it out of. Which is really sad, that something as simple as a liquid can be so powerful to just completely derail your life. And so without it, it's kind of naturally mended. I've kind of come back to the state that she met me in.
Right.
This like kind of more bubbly, outgoing, high energy person instead of very lethargic, having no self-worth person that I became.
Nice. That's good.
And then just like being there. It's not even about like spilling your guts and being super open and super honest and like, every little emotion that you're feeling. It's just like being there for somebody and actually looking them in the eyes and opening up your heart so that you guys can become that one.
Right. So just presence.
Just presence.
Pure sober presence.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's hard to do. Like
It is hard to do.
it's a continual practice for
Yeah,
me.
it is, man. And it's hard to be around, especially with alcoholism and being young like you are. It's like, what do I got? What do I have next? What's next?
Yeah.
How do I do this the long term?
Yeah, it's going to take a lot of just staying motivated on education. I've already reached out to some like colleges on maybe getting a master's in mental health care.
Okay.
Just completely changing up my career.
Oh,
We'll see what happens with that.
yeah, but you like your career, right?
Kinda, I like what I do, because it helps the world,
Right.
solar.
Yeah.
But the day to day is not very life giving. I'm pretty fueled by like deep, intimate conversations,
Okay.
and being a manager
Yeah.
doesn't allow for that. I still do it sometimes, but I think if an HR person were sitting in on some of these conversations, I'd, maybe be fired by now.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's what makes our relationship special.
I know, it's just instant. Oh, wait, I mean, Bob,
Bob,
I'm killing myself.
right?
It's good to see you after 10 years.
Hey, I'm gonna come kill myself. I just want to talk to you for a little bit. Get your what are you struggling with?
Hey, wait, I have a question for you, Brendan.
Yeah.
What's the date?
It's not happening.
But what's the date? What's that special date?
There's no date.
It's just gone.
It's gone.
All
As
right.
of right now. As of right now, the date's gone.
Well, that's great to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to do some intense therapy. I was invited to this ranch to do this program. And I don't have all the details on it, but talking to my buddy, he had 20 concussions, played hockey, and he said it has changed his entire life, which is amazing. Now he still does maintenance, and he still has this little bit of suicide ideology once in a while, but it's easier to combat now, and it's easier to stay present, and it's easier to not be depressed. And that's you want, like I've oftentimes said that I'm 25% depressed and 75% good, but that can switch pretty easily for me. So hopefully this will even take away some of that 25% and not be so detrimental to my psyche on the long term. and that date changed because of this offer. That, you know, I was definitely walking towards, and it's still possible, but you know, the opportunity I can't throw away for the opportunity to help save people's lives, or at least give them an opportunity to save their own life.
Yeah. You're refueling the tank, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't wait to fucking talk to you
I know.
after this experience.
I'm excited. I'll be gone through April. So, you know, somebody else may have to host this for a while.
Dude, you'll have to come back through here.
I know.
I'll be a year by then.
Yep. Well,
I'll have to have a cake or something.
Yeah, I know.
Get that sugar intake.
I know. But, well, thanks, man. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this has been great. I love doing the follow up with you. I love being here. I love being around your family. And
yeah, man, they love you.
Yeah.
So much, dude. It is so awesome to see.
It's all because, you know, they made a fort and I sat in it.
It's because you were present with them, man. This is what it all is.
It's so great. It's just, hey, punching me in the shoulder. So
What's his name? He like gives you a hug, and then he asks what your name is.
I know. So awesome. Well, thanks, buddy. I appreciate you. Love you. And we'll see you on the flip side.
Yeah, man. Love you too. Peace.
Mm-hmm.